David Karura is a communications consultant lending capacity to organizations in the faith-based sector. Karura has served as the Global Director of Communication and Strategy for Mavuno Church and previously as Director of Groove Networks, a wholly owned subsidiary of Mosound Entertainment, East and Central Africa's largest event and experiential company. He has also previously served as a media and entertainment entrepreneur, writer and journalist, artist manager, and content creator. Karura is married to Joanne and together they are blessed with one son. Dr. David Oginde is currently the presiding bishop of Christ is the Answer Ministries and the Chancellor of Pan-Africa Christian University. Apart from his pastoral duties, Dr. Oginde is actively involved in speaking into and influencing national policies and issues related to governance and leadership in Kenya. He is married to Nancy and together they are blessed with 2 children, Joyce and Chris. His Excellency Professor Kivutha Kibwana is the Governor of Makueni County from 2013 to date. Professor Kivutha Kibwana has been a public servant for many years as a Member of Parliament for Makueni constituency, a minister and also the presidential advisor. He is a well-learned man who holds a doctorate in judicial science, 2 Master of Law degrees from Harvard University USA and the University of London, Master of Arts degree in Theological Studies from the Africa International University and a Bachelor of Law degree from the University of Nairobi. He is well known for being a man of integrity throughout his life. Richard Njau is a digital enabler with an understanding of everything from digital strategy development through to implementation. Known as one of the pioneering gospel hip-hop artists in Africa, he is now cleaning the airways using his YouTube channel to empower upcoming musicians, assisting them to avoid the pitfalls of the music industry by interviewing veteran musicians about their musical journeys. He is married and is blessed with 1 beautiful baby girl. Sylvia Mulinge is currently the Chief Customer Officer responsible for leading Safaricom's goal on customer experience as a key differentiator of its overall company strategy. She is in charge of consumer business, brand marketing, brand experience, digital transformation, sales and distribution, operations and commercial planning and pricing. Sylvia joined Safaricom in February 2006 from Unilever and has held various leadership roles for the last 8 years while in Safaricom. She is a mentor and leader in both her private and personal life. Sylvia is the recipient of several awards, which include her appointment to the Presidential Award Scheme, being named one of Kenya's top 40 under 40 women for 3 consecutive years, and a Young Global Leader Award recipient in 2015. She also sits on a number of local boards and is a vice chair of the UN Women and Stereotype Alliance.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends on what time you are joining us. This is Karura Community Chapel, which is hosting Momentum Africa Conference, the online version. This is 2020. Now with us, I have been joined by amazing speakers. But before we invite them, this is a point where you share the link on YouTube, start a watch party, and let's join this conversation together. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. How are you guys doing?
Well, good.
Good. It's good to be here.
Amazing. Now, 2020 has given us enough time to reflect on the past, even as we plan for the present. Now, what are some of the things that you have observed over time that have revolved, evolved, changed? Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. Excited. This is an example of what's I have seen happening, the kind of change that is happening and that has been happening over the last couple of years. Think about it. We're doing a conference. This is a conference and we're doing it digitally. Would you have thought that this would have been possible 5 years ago? Was this even in your mind? So part of what I've seen happening ever since 1995 with the introduction of the internet through Microsoft Windows 95, people have started, from that time till today, there has been a shift to digital. And over that period of time, there's been a rigidity. People have been a bit rigid to accepting digital. But because of COVID, the biggest shift that I would say I've seen happening is the acceptability to that change. I'm sure this conference wouldn't have been happening, would have probably had a lot of people here if it wasn't for COVID. But because of the season that we are, we have been forced to accept digital. And it's not just within the sector of church. I'm talking about throughout all different sectors. The acceptance to digital has been very high. And it's exciting to see. And with that is coming a lot of innovation and a lot of new things that we had never seen before.
Yeah. That's very true. What about you, Sylvia?
I think for me, it's just been the level of disruption in our human and social interactions. In terms of the way we interact, I mean, nowadays you don't go anywhere without a mask. We were discussing earlier and say you hear somebody cough and everybody tenses. That's the reality. And I don't think we ever envisioned as we were coming into 2020 about the dramatic change that we'd all have to go through in terms of our own personal human interactions. Now, before I even go home or think about going to see my parents, I have to think about testing for COVID. So I'm not exposing my parents to that. And therefore, when you then translate that into all the different facets of our lives, in terms of how we consume, how we purchase products, how we interact, how we run our businesses, everything has dramatically shifted. I was thinking earlier around, on a scale of 1 to 10, there are businesses that have thrived and prospered. Think about things like Zoom or video conferencing platforms. Zoom now, if you look at their stock share price, it has gone through the roof. They probably, on a scale of 1 to 10, are operating on 11 or 12. Businesses like Netflix, when everybody was on lockdown, everybody now went online. And that's what then created a big opportunity for people who are able to seize the moment and begin to share their content online. But at the same time, there's also the other extreme, also other businesses that have been impacted that are in the service industry or in tourism. So I think we've seen a wide spectrum, and all this has just been caused by the changes that we've seen in terms of how we interact and how we purchase and consume goods. And it will be interesting to see how this now goes on into the long term. Just speaking of what Richie said, I read a funny Twitter online the other day, which said, ever since digital became a common term, we've had CIOs and CEOs trying to entrench the same, but the CEO didn't win this game. The CEO didn't win this game. It's COVID that transformed us all and made us all go digital. So truly transformational.
Yeah.
Absolutely. First, let me say I'm so grateful. Thank you, Momentum, for the invite. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you guys are doing this. I think I echo the words of Richie. To give it a go, I think it's just a fantastic thing, and I'm so glad to be here. I think the creative industry has. It's been interesting because the disruption in the creative industry has been ongoing, I think, for a couple of years. This season has just accelerated it, I think, more than ever before. If I think about one of the changes that has happened, the one that for me comes to mind is power. Is who has the power and who controls the industry. Years ago, and Richie, when you're a musician, you, as a creative, you'd have to wait for a radio station to call you. You'd have to wait for a newspaper magazine or, one of those to call you and kind of give you exposure. And now there's been a very, very subtle power shift where people are taking back the power. There's been a proliferation of platforms that allows creatives, think about if you're a photographer, for instance. If you're a photographer, you had to, take your photos to a place for them to be processed. I'm sure some people watching at home have no idea what that means. That's fine. To get them processed. And now if you think about it, because of the platforms and the technology, you have the power to do that yourself. With your phone, you see people who create music videos off of their mobile devices. So for me, that's been, I think, the most interesting thing. COVID has definitely accelerated that. I've been so excited to watch, if you think about people like Jalango and people like that who are now hosting their own shows. It's interesting. Even radio and television presenters are not waiting for TV anymore. They are creating their own content and rivaling the platforms that existed in the past.
Yes.
And you become a bigger brand than even what you are representing in the past. So that I think shift of power for me, I think in the creative industry has been very exciting to watch over the past couple of years.
And that's a very important shift to note. The mushrooming of new ideas, people venturing into businesses, online businesses are now thriving. What are some of the mistakes that you have observed in this particular season? Maybe we can start with you, Sylvia.
Well, I mean, looking at what you've said, I guess we are all driven by our dreams. But, I always am a firm believer that you think big, you start small, and you grow very fast. And especially in this day and age, this COVID season, when you're thinking about starting a new business and you're trying to secure funding, it's not the easiest of things. So we see sometimes some of the mistakes are we dream big, right? So God gives us a vision, he downloads it to us, but he says there's a journey and there's a process that you have to go through as you grow into maturity and everything. So either you are very passionate and you want to start big and you despise the days of small beginnings, right? So you go big, you scale big, you haven't tested the model, you're not sure where your monetization is going to come from, what are your customers, when are you going to do your first transaction and test and see whether it's successful. So there's that. Or sometimes the enormity of the vision stifles you, right? You're not able to move. You are faced with fear and then you end up casting the dream away. So I think there are those two extremes. And then, of course, in between that, there are all the challenges of any new person who is venturing into a new business. How do you find the right capital? How do you deliver the right customer experience? Because that's what is going to help you to stand out. When you fail or you fall down, what do you do with that experience? Do you use it to grow you? Or do you use it to make you to kind of pull back from the dream that you have? I think those are the common pitfalls that you probably see with a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs. But I think the key thing is always wear the attitude of no matter what happened to me yesterday, I can rise up, have a new day and begin and try again. I had somebody once say that you start the process, however far you go, if you fail or you stop, start again, repeat. Keep on repeating. Greatness comes from consistency. And so long as people, especially those who are running small and medium enterprises, are very clear about this is a vision, these are the values that are going to drive that vision, and then they're consistent about that, then ultimately greatness will come.
Yeah.
What about you, Karura?
I think that a couple of things. I think one mistake I'm definitely seeing in the creative sector, but I think across different sectors, is this thing we are waiting for COVID to pass. We are waiting for this season to end so we can go back to what we knew. And the reality is there is no back. There really isn't a back. I think this season for us it's redefined so many things. And I think one of the key skills that people must have in this season is the ability to unlearn. Not even learn new things, to unlearn what you thought you knew, what you knew in the past. So I see, creatives who go onto the digital space, and what they do is digital reflection. It's really what they were doing in the physical space and trying to reflect that in the digital space. And what happens is that you have to realize your consumer in the digital space consumes so differently. Let's say, for instance, if I was a musician and I was putting up a gig on this thing, how I create energy in the room is so different from how you create energy in the digital space. I'd be like, hey, hands in the air, wapinduru, nini, nini. You can't do that anymore, even if you are a preacher or a pastor. And you have to kind of figure out what's this new season? What does it mean? What do I need to get rid of permanently to be able to help me navigate the season that's coming ahead? So I think it's that thing we are waiting to see what will happen and go back to. Somehow you need to kind of see this season, and I hate to use the word, but really as a blessing for you to begin to unlearn and to begin to learn new skills that will help you navigate the season moving forward.
Yeah. Karura, for me, there's quite a lot of mistakes people are making in this whole season of transitioning to digital. There's two big ones. Karura has touched on perfectly on one of the ones I was about to mention, which is digital reflection, which is doing things in the exact same way that you did it in the analog world before digital. But the one that I want to speak to absolutely every single person watching is analysis paralysis. So actually not moving because, no, this is how I used to do it before, and trying to analyze how do I do it. So actually that whole element of this is how I used to do it before, so there's no other way to do it. One of the things that I'd say is trying, we may be experienced at our different fields, but none of us in this space here have been in this season before. What is enabling us to excel and get better is actually jumping in blind and just beginning to touch and beginning to do. So what do I mean by that? If you've got a business and you've never opened up a social media page because you were comfortable with the way life was before, try it. If you've been a business and you've never put cameras in front of yourself to talk about your products and talk about your services, try it. Don't overthink. This is a conference. I commend you. Kuria said it, and I will commend you guys so hard because you're saying, you know what? We used to do momentum before. We did momentum before COVID. Now, COVID is here. How do we do this? You're not professionals at it, but you are stepping out and doing it. So to anybody out there who may be watching this, part of the success is in the doing. And the failures are not actually failures. They're learning that will teach you how to then get better.
Yeah.
So I hear about the analysis paralysis, but I dare you to step out into the known.
Yeah.
Becky, can I just add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
I was talking to a good friend of mine who runs a digital agency. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, let me tell you the truth, Korea. There is nobody who in this season understands digital. You may have a digital agency, you may have clients, you'll come and tell them this will work, that will work. And he was like, the reality is we are all giving it a go. Nobody fully understands, even us, we don't know. We have to be confident for our clients, but we are not sure. And I think that is more pronounced in this COVID season than ever before. And why I mentioned it is because of what Richie said, is that the people who are going to crack this season are the people who put their toe in the water and say, let me try. We don't know if Momentum 2020 is going to be a success or a failure. There's only one way you can find out. Not by analysis, not by getting consultants to talk to you, but by saying, let me try. Let me give it a go. And it's only in giving it a go that you will know. So I'm really just echoing what Richie is saying. I'm just like, this season, it gives you, honestly, if you tried Momentum 2019 digitally, you know, the uptake would have been very, very, much less than it would be this year. But because you're giving it a go, you're beginning to learn, I wonder if digital works. I wonder if we do this way. And I'm like, especially for people in the creative sector, try, fail forward. I love that phrase, fail forward. What that means is, if you're going to make a mistake, make a big one. Make a big mistake, but make sure that you are learning from it. But you won't know if it's a mistake unless you give it a go for yourself.
Now, there are people, thank you so much for that. There are people now who are ready. Their toes are ready to get into the water. And the question now is there a difference between Christian content and secular content? How would you go about that question?
So obviously this season, I think our content creation right now is just off the charts. Everyone and their mother and their dog has a YouTube channel and is creating some content or other. So it's a great question. I dichotomize it a little bit differently. I don't even think about Christian or mainstream or secular content. For me, when I come at it from a faith perspective, because I'm assuming that's what you're asking, is I always think about what is godly content and what's not godly content. What's helpful content and what's not helpful content. Because for me, I think for people of faith, it's very easy to think, okay, my content must have Jesus every 10 seconds. I must be wearing the rosary. I must have, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think for me, the reality, I've seen a lot of people who are creating content. I have a good friend who's creating content on masculinity. Amani Marangani's fantastic podcast on living truthfully. And is it Christian content? I don't think so. It is, however, content that has a Christian worldview or a biblical worldview. And I think the thing is, whether you're in fashion, whether you're in cooking, whether you're in music, regardless of what part of the spectrum that you're on, I think for me it's to say, if I'm part of the household of faith and it's saying, let me make sure that my content is informed by biblical values. It doesn't have to be Christian content. I've created content. Richie is a big content creator, but it's informed by, I think, a Christian worldview.
And speaking about the faith, there are people who believe that there's a certain kind of religion that does business perfectly well. Now, how would you advise someone who is now a believer and would want to start business? What advice would you tell them?
About choosing the religion that they follow?
Become a Jew.
Well, I guess the Jews is because of the history and the nation that, the roots that they have. But I think the thing is, I mean, when you're approaching business, it's all about the download and the blueprint that you have, right, from the very beginning, right? I hope you're drawing it from a perspective of faith, but then you know you're drawing it accurately, and you also know that the strength and the wisdom that you need to be able to run it is not your own. So you have like a special force that is also backing you as you're implementing it. But at the end of the day, I think every person's vision will be tested, right? And one of the things that we also have to realize as Christians is as we come to operate in this world, I think sometimes one of the things that really fails us is that we come with a very Christianese kind of a lens, and you forget that you're talking to customers, right? You know, at the end of the day, in as much as you're a Christian and a Jesus follower, you want to buy a good quality product.
Yep.
You want to get good quality service. You want to ensure that that product works. So those are the basic fundamentals, right? And that does not change, right? Now, how you design your product or what ultimately your vision or your product or your service ultimately becomes, depending on your vision, will be driven a lot by your own personal values, your work ethic, the way you show up in terms of how you're addressing the challenges that find you along the way. Are you a person of persistence? Are you a person who's consistent? Are you a person, even when you don't see the way, you say, I will put my foot in the water. I have the faith that will guarantee this. Am I also leveraging on a network of mentors and coaches and people who are around me in my community to help me so that I also shorten my learning curves? Those are principles that will apply to you, whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, right? Maybe there are some faiths that have probably been able to articulate that a lot better and probably embedded it in their value system. So when you're in part of that kind of cohort, you're drawing from those values, and then that is what is shaping how you're running your business and anything. But at the end of the day, we live in a world where you will be judged based on what it is that you present. So it's not about the fact, I won't come and buy your product and say, just because you're a Christian, I will buy more of it and the product is crap, it doesn't work and all that stuff. It has to work. And those principles are fundamental. Now, if you layer it and build it upon the foundation of Christ, you fly.
You're good to go.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about content that people want versus what they need. Talk to us about that.
Do you know the best kind of content?
Content that people need that they want.
Say that again.
So content that people, because you've asked me to distinguish between content that people want and content that people need. But how amazing would it be if we're creating content that people need, but they want it? So let me use let me explain this content so that you can understand this world of content. What we are doing right now is packaging content. Content is not a video. Content is what is in your mind. It's your thoughts. So content is just the packaging, the wrapping. So you can either, what a video is the wrapping. You can wrap content in writings. You can wrap content in audio form. You can wrap content in video form like we're doing right now. This is video mixed with audio. So there's three types of content. There's content that educates people. There's a lot of education happening in this content. There's content that inspires people, and there's content that positively entertains people. Now, just because you are educating people doesn't mean that that can't be good content that is fun, like this hip show right here. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not boring in our packaging and in our delivery of the content. It is fun and it is exciting to watch, but it's amazing because this is content that people need. What we're doing right now is educating people on how they can survive, and not just survive, but thrive in the coming times. So what I'm trying to say is that people need to have a shift and begin to create content that people need, but create it, as Sylvia very clearly said, so excellently that it is something that I am begging for. I'm a Netflix binger of documentaries. Yesterday I was watching the Nelka documentary because I'm obsessed with learning. But the format in which Netflix presents learning, especially their documentaries, is in such a relevant way. I learn about the World War in such an exciting way in how they package their content. Church content, music content, the kind of content that we are all creating needs to be possess those three. So yes, it's educational, but what stops you from making edutainment? Get what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, it's informative, but what stops it from being packaging a song that is so hip and has such a tight beat, but that song has an amazing message. So I look at it like you need to be creating content that people need, but you create it so well that it's what people want. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, right? I am loving
Put some
this
sound effects.
conversation. Now, I hope you have invited your friends. Now, when we talk about Momentum Africa, there are 4 key things that we are targeting: the business world, digital media, creative arts, and governance. Now, we cannot talk about Africa without mentioning what governance looks like. Take a look at this.
I think the role of leadership is to facilitate the implementation of what people want, what people deserve. And of course, when you're a political leader, there are resources that are available from taxes and so on, so that you are a steward of those resources, so that those resources can benefit people. And in the Bible, those who are good stewards of resources, God is happy with them. And therefore, it's important to ask the people, what is it that really they want to be done, what they want to happen. Like all these things, we say public participation for budgets, in Makwene, even for the projects, we have People's Project Committee, Project Management Committee being responsible. So that is part of the implementation. If you're a contractor, you can't be paid if those community members don't say yes. When you do that, people trust you. People trust you. They get encouraged to be core leaders. You are co-creating. And for me, leadership becomes easy, or even management. They become easy because we're not doing it alone. It's not a big burden, so to speak. And you have advisors and so on. But sometimes, if you want to do wrong, you can't consult people. If you want leadership to benefit you and to benefit a few of your friends, family, and so on, you cannot involve others seriously because they will find out that you are not doing things the right way. And that's when you start oppressing people. That's why you start punishing people unfairly because you want to silence them. And I don't think that's the correct thing to do. Even in church, there can be temptation for a pastor to want to do things his way, her way, and then when they are challenged, they start saying, you are out of the Spirit, and the Holy Spirit, has kind of departed from your, from you, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, when we have elected leaders, and when they come to be elected, they're very nice, and they're telling all the nice things, and they're telling you they're going to do many things for you, and all that. But when they know they have like 5 years, they forget all those promises. And although there are systems of if it's a governor, getting them out, even a president, you can get them impeached, or MP, MCA, you can get them recalled. Those processes are not easy. And even the accountability mechanisms, so that there's true accountability, particularly to the people themselves, not necessarily only through institutions. And that's why it's important to have a different way of leading and managing, so that people are more at the center of their own governance. The biggest challenge incidentally happened in Makwene in my first term, because the MCAs decided that they wanted about $1 billion shillings, and we had 5 billion shillings, and so the rest of the population, about 1 million people, were going to get about 4 million. Then about 40 people who were elected, and the workers, 60 of them or thereabouts, would get 1 billion shillings. So I said, no, if we do it this way, we'll be doing it wrong. And I thought they were joking, but they were not joking. So they told me, we will not pass the budget. The first year they didn't pass the budget by November, when they were supposed to have passed it by 30th of June. The second year they passed it in March, just 3 months to the end of financial year. So the first 3 years it was very difficult to do much. And I told them that now, if this is how you want us to govern Makuene, I don't want to be governor. Because this is not what we came here to do, and we will be taking people's money, and that's not what I want to do. But you see, now that was the challenge of if you are confronted by leadership, quote leadership, that really wants, because they were saying in Nairobi people eat, this money has come to the county, why are you preventing us from eating? I kind of had in mind something that scripture that I really treasure in Samuel, when Samuel is handing over to the new king, because the people have asked for a king, and Samuel stands before his son, before the anointed king, before the people, and in the scripture before the Lord, and he asks, have I taken anybody's oxen? Have I taken anybody's donkey? Have I been bribed to compromise a judgment? And the people, and he asks some other questions, have I oppressed anybody? And the people say, you have not, you are witness. Of course, that is also said for the new king to also understand that that is the way you are going to rule, now that people have asked for a king and God has said, okay, if you want kings, I'll give you kings. But it's a good thing at the end of your journey to be able to stand before the people you have led, and then you ask those questions, and they can say, yes, he has not stolen from us, he has not taken from us.
Read throughout scriptures the people who made a difference in society for young people, all the way from Joseph, you come to Daniel, to Esther, Jeremiah. I mean, there are very few Isaiahs in the Bible, other than people like Abraham and others. Daniel was a young person. David was a young person. Jeremiah was a young person. Esther was a young person. Joseph was a young person. Jesus was a young person. All these people were young people. So this idea that leadership, governance, and the issues of society belong to older people is a deception that we should not buy into. And when young people do not get up and take their responsibility and their role, because you are shaping the future for yourself. If you allow it to go with the people that are already lived their lives, then you have lost it. So for me, young people really need to take great interest in society and what is going on. It is very unfortunate that young people today, some of them don't even watch news. The news time, they have the earplugs listening to whatever they are listening to because they find it irrelevant to them, while their future is actually passing by them. When we were in the university as young people, the university was like the conscience of the nation. We would, many times I remember we would go to the streets because of something that has happened in Nigeria or in a different country somewhere, because we are not in agreement with it. Comrade power was a very powerful thing. So the young people were in touch with what is happening locally, corruption issues, injustices and human rights and all those things. It was young people that kept the government on its toes. these days, the young people are so passive. It is not biblical. So I would call upon our young people, particularly Christians, to take their space and provide leadership and be the conscience of the nation. We must remember the Bible is a condensed history, very condensed, and only highlights are given. So sometimes when we read it, we feel like what is written as snippets was the real life. That was not the real life. These are but snippets of what was happening. And it is very rare that you find a person called out of their context. They were always called within their context. So it's very rare that God will call you from where you are and take you to a totally different context to make a difference. Very rare. It does happen. You can be called from Kenya to go and be a missionary in China, but that is very rare. Usually God wants you to make a difference right where you are, because the plan and purpose that God has for you is from before you are born. So even where you are born, the family you are born into, and the life the journey that you are walking is all part of God's plan. And so when you are sensitive to hear what God is saying, you will then realize that in that space where you are, there are things He wants you to do. And as you are faithful in doing the little that is within your context, is how He gets you to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. It is rare that God will pick you today and put you in parliament as an MP. It's very unlikely. But as you are faithful in the little around your surrounding, you may find yourself one day in parliament, in cabinet, in other places. Because he who is faithful in little, much more is given. So start where you are with what you have. Look at your own neighborhood. What are the things that you can do that can make a difference to your society? In the space, in the social media space that possibly you are in, what kind of difference can you make?
Take charge. As Christians, you don't just say, I'm going to pray. Yes, prayer is very central. Prepare yourself. So this is where I'm saying, even before you get to the point of how are we going to change the policies, how will we be involved in changing the policies, first of all, prepare yourself so that you come into the leadership. If I had my way myself, I would advocate for a situation where, and I think I can advocate that, where a third of the leadership of Africa would be young people. When at least a third young people, a third women involve persons with disability in our systems, so that people who have the peculiar needs can put them on the table, because they know what their needs are. The young people, they are the majority, about 70%, I think, on the continent. I think 7 billion under 35 in the world. So that's a giant which needs to wake up. There is that. So that instead of saying that I will influence policies when there are these big people, old people who are in charge and they don't want to do things to make sure we have employment, we have a life, and and the things that will help us happen. So be in the place where you can actually determine what should be done. I think that's the first thing. So that now, of course, in public participation, you can, as a little bit, like if, let us say Kenya, if the young people had some movement together of young people saying, this is the Youth Manifesto, this is what we want in the next elections to happen, and we are going to be part of this leadership. We don't want to simply just go and vote. We don't want to be used for violence. We don't want that. We want to be at the table, and we want to bring the youth agenda at the table. And even, even children, like we have had experiences here of getting children to tell us what they want in budgets. And they even draw, they even sing, they even do skits, and through them they tell you what they need. They say to go to the river, to go where there is a nut dam to get water. It's too long, it's too far. Then we are late in school. Our school is on the roadside. So when the matatus pass, there is dust. So they tell you, if you listen to them. So this is why I'm thinking that actually the solution to Africa's problem lies with the youth. And that is why, the Christianity today, the disciples, they're all young people, and their master was a young person as man. He was a young person. And, the gospel has reached all over the place because of those young people. I think, there are the usual ways where you come together and you have a position, you advocate for it, whether it's in public participation, maybe a few young people are in parliament, you go to them, you tell them that we want this passed, you ask for round tables, and you say that we want a round table with the president, we want another round table with the MPs and another one with the governors. I'm not saying belittling those efforts, but I'm saying the real thing is for the young people to be part of the decision making, to be part of the leadership.
The governor has mentioned something very important, the role of policies in governance. Now, Sylvia, how does that look like in the business world?
I think based on my understanding is that policies help us to be able to create a consistent framework through which we do business, right? And your policies will be guided by the values that you have as an organization. And it doesn't matter the size of your organization, whether you're a big governmental institution or you are a corporate organization or you're a small and medium enterprise, you must have a worldview about certain things. So for example, when you think about HR policy or human policy, it's around how do you treat your people, right? What is the interaction that you want to create? What is the culture of your organization, right? Because that has a very big impact in terms of how people show up, their level of productivity, the level of energy, how they interact with your customers, how they deliver the solutions or products and services that you're taking to the market. When you think about regulation, depending on the space that you're in, when my friends here on the panel speak about digital, you're also talking about data. You're talking about data privacy. So what is the perspective that you have around issues around data privacy, especially now that we have a law around it, and customers are also becoming very conscious about their rights. So I think it's imperative when you're setting up a business and whatever business model you're in whichever area you're in, it doesn't have to be codified into some form of hard literature that you have to sit down and write, but you must have a perspective about how you want to approach the world that you'll be interacting with, whether it's the world of your customers, whether it's the world of your regulators, if you're being regulated, whether it's the world of your taxman and how you're going to be interacting with them. Have a frame with which you will say, everything that I do, no matter the size of my business, as I'm starting, this is how I will consistently address these issues. Obviously, as your business grows, right, this might evolve or might change because we live in a dynamic environment, and businesses are built, the businesses that do the best are the businesses that learn how to adapt depending on their circumstances. But ultimately, there must be a view with which you tackle the world. So be sure about that. Define that from the very beginning, because that's what will help you to remain consistent when everything else around you might be failing.
And can I just add on to this? The policies that exist in the analog world, or what we call the offline world, what happens in the digital world is those same policies are then literally transported onto the digital platform. So it's not that, now because it's digital, I can do this, which is illegal in the analog world. I can now then begin to do this. We have seen even bloggers being arrested, or influencers, as we like to call them, being arrested because of breaking, for example, privacy policies which exist in the analog world, and now thinking, because I'm digital, I can just publish somebody's private information online. No, that law still exists. So within your companies, within your countries, within even the world, you have to maintain the same policies that exist in the offline world onto the online world. Don't think that this is a free pass that you get, and therefore now I can break these rules and regulations. It doesn't operate like that.
Yeah, I mean, I will add to that and say, I mean, that is true. I think, though, there's also the perspective where you realize that the creative industry, and I think digital as well, I think we are at the place in this part of the world where there is not enough policy regarding them yet. And where there's still a lot of, just in terms of regulation, we are still trying to figure out, our way through that. So even if you talk about digital, for instance, there are questions that we still need to be answering regarding things like jurisdiction. If I create a video and post it and my server is in the US, where is the jurisdiction if I break a law? And so those are things that I think we are still kind of grappling with. I think in the creative world as well, if you're, say, photographer, even though we do have, laws and frameworks regarding things like copyright, you see infringement all the time, and I think because I think we've carried it over from one world to the next without sitting in this world and saying, how do we create the framework that is specific for this particular industry that will help regulate it, help give it structure, and help it move forward. So I think that's one of the things. But I think the other one also is that I think we are a little bit, in a bit of a jungle where we are still trying to figure out policy and framework for some of our sectors.
That is very true. Now, internet connectivity is almost being added to the basic
human
needs of a human being. Yeah. And everyone is looking for fast internet. And we know Safaricom is very big on that. You guys are hoping to launch the 5G internet this year. But with the fast internet connectivity, there are amazing opportunities that have come up in this particular age. So how would you comment on the various opportunities that are coming up with that?
Well, I guess what the internet offers. So first of all, the internet is a basic need. I can confirm that it's on the, or if you look at the new Maslow hierarchy, at the bottom is battery and Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So if you don't have
when
battery,
people come to your house now, the first thing is, Wi-Fi.
China Wi-Fi.
Charger and Wi-Fi.
So it is definitely at the top up there. So anyway, I mean, now on a more serious note, the reality is what digital has done, and if you look at even the world of, especially all these new young people, I know right now there's a lot of news around TikTok, what America is saying about what the Chinese have developed. But if you look at the reality of TikTok and even Instagram, and well, I'm not a Facebook, I'm young. Facebook is
the cool kids. You're the cool kids on Instagram.
But if you look at platforms like TikTok or IG, the reason why they become what they become is because suddenly you have a voice and your voice can be heard across the world.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that can be for good or can also not be for good, right? And therefore, obviously, even with the higher penetration of internet, faster data and everything, there's also the downside of how do we also protect ourselves from content that is not right, especially if you're also looking at it from a parental perspective, so that we do not expose our kids to content that is not right for them. But the bigger upside is the positive, right?
Yep.
So I can create content here. There was a joke I had the other day. I don't know if it's true, but there was somebody when all this stuff was going on in the States about Trump, and somebody was in Nyeri and they tweeted something and it suddenly went global. I don't know if you remember that story. Yeah. The guy was in Nyeri. He didn't even probably realize that the thing was going to get the momentum, if I may use the word of this conference. But just on the digital platform, you tweet something. I mean, Kenyans are known on Twitter just because of their voice that they have been able to create. So I think for me, if you were now to think about it from an entrepreneurship perspective, the world is open to you. even from a perspective of learning. I can sit here and get as good quality as an education as someone who's in Harvard. I don't have to attend. I don't have to fly. All I have to simply do is to get online. I don't have to travel overseas for me to take my goods and services there to be seen. What is so great about TikTok? Young people are being able to express their creativity in dance, in content on one platform. I see my daughter recording herself with her friends in the bedroom. She uploads it and then, just begins to interact with the rest of the world. So I think what internet has done is to reduce barriers to access.
Yep.
It has opened up the world and kind of created a more equal, opportune kind of world for people to be able to compete, right? Based on your level of creativity and how well you're able to adapt to what the current consumer needs.
Yeah, I've got to echo what she's just said. The word there is accessibility. One of the things that you just need to think about, first of all, when it comes to the internet, sometimes we are looking for big answers as to, or what opportunities are there. Just picture yourself. One of the exercises that I ask people to do is go back 10 years and tell people what you did that day. Explain to them what woke you up your phone. What do you mean? Or go back to before the internet for those who are there. Explain to people, how did your phone wake you up? How that big phone that rings? No, it was my mobile phone. What do you mean? Phones can be carried. There was an alarm on your phone. How does that, that is crazy. I then came for the Momentum conference. I didn't know where Karura was, so I used my Google Maps to come. What is Google Maps? Google Maps is something that, internet has brought about so many solutions that we can spend a year worth of a conference talking about all the different solutions. But one of the most amazing solutions that the internet has brought, especially relevant for this season, and I call this season that we are in the digital value economy, this season that we are in going forward. So what does accessibility mean? It means I no longer need a middleman. Yes, there are some people who've built some certain infrastructures like M-Pesa that make it absolutely amazing. But think about it. I no longer need a middleman to engage with my customer, to engage, as Kuria was talking about in the arts, with my audience, my fans. So think about if you are creating value and packaging that value in a way that is accessible to them. So that value can be a video. Like this is an amazing conference. I would ask people, if you are receiving value from the conversation here, and this is actually truly me asking, donate to these people. Give back to Karura Church and tell them, thank you so much for the value that I have received in this conversation. That is value transfer. And it doesn't have to be locked to a certain amount. Now imagine this is possible throughout. It doesn't matter what sector you are. I have my wife who is doing online psychology. I have people who are doing online entertainment. Did you hear what David Kuria said? Jalango is competing not with other influencers, but with Citizen TV, because he's competing for the same thing, eyeballs and attention. Churches, let's have an honest conversation about what's happening within the church industry, within the church sector. Right now, who am I watching online? I'm watching Simba. Simba is just an amazing person who loves God, who gives such amazing insights and revelations about the word of God. And every Sunday, I go there and I consume his content. Sometimes my church has been across different borders, Transformation Church. I'm part of the Transformation Nation. I watch. Why? Because the internet eliminates borders. This is a kind of space, different demographics that never had accessibility to certain contents. Yes, where Sylvia mentioned there may be a negativity in a younger demographic accessing content made for an older demographic. There may be a negativity there, but also there may be a positivity because right now that child may have been a genius and now can access education and content that adds value to himself. So always ask yourself two things. What value am I consuming? What value at any moment of time am I consuming? I mean, what content am I consuming? Is that content adding value to me? Through those things that I mentioned, education, information, and positive entertainment. But secondly, as a business, ask yourself, what value am I giving out? Now, this may bring about innovation because previously, per se, maybe you were making tents. And now, because of COVID, there's restrictions. Or you are a wedding MC. And now you can't really MC weddings. But ask yourself, as a wedding MC, what value can I still give? And you may take out, who needs a camera? You may take out the new camera, aka your mobile phone, and begin capturing the value that is in your head, the prime real estate between your two ears, packaging it into content that people can consume, and you begin giving them value. So the reason why I'm trying to layman this is so that you don't think that you need a lot of machinery and equipment for you to begin transferring value in what is called now the digital value economy. You don't need that. You can begin talking about what you do. Young, doesn't matter how young you are, you can start now. You can do it exactly. You can start now. You can package that content, put it on a platform that instantly distributes it for it. I'm extremely passionate about this because, as Kuria said, I look at this season as a blessing. Despite all that's happening, I believe that God is doing so much. In every crisis, there's opportunity. And in every crisis, there's such amazing things that God is doing to elevate his people and help the world that's out there.
You know, with the internet, the reality is there's so many things we can say. I mean, a lot has been said already. There's so many. The internet is an amazing enabler. It's an amazing accelerator. I was just thinking about a couple of weeks ago, we did a conference. We talked about this before, very similar to this one. And it was interesting for us when we looked at the statistics and analytics of a completely virtual conference. This year, we had 2.2 million minutes of the conference watched online. You know, we sat back and looked at that statistic and we were like, this is unbelievable. It blew our minds. Maybe, maybe we didn't have the faith for it, but we were completely blown away by it. You know, we had people from 25 different nations across the world, some of the most remote places, tuning in and catching this content. Now we are at the place where we are asking ourselves, and this is what I was talking about, unlearning some things. We are now at the place where we are asking ourselves, are we ever having the physical gathering again? Should we go back to that? And I give that story because it really is, I think, an illustration of how the internet is able to accelerate stuff that you're already doing and enable things that you are doing. When I think about the value, PwC, international auditing firm, did this really good research, and they do it every now and then, on the value of the media and entertainment economy in a couple of countries, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, and Ghana. And I think as of 2017, what they said was that the value of the media and entertainment industry in Kenya was $1.7 billion. And this is 2017. And their prediction, obviously this was prior to COVID, was that we'd be at $2.9 billion in Kenya. This is just media, this is the creative sector in this country. And I think the thing for creatives as you listen and you interpret statistics like this is to ask, how can the internet enable me to become a part of that number? How can I tap into that? Because I think the internet is able to just enable you in a sense. I think about I just mentioned one thing with the internet, and I think for creatives, the internet is an amazing learning space. It's a brilliant, Richard has talked about documentaries, but if you think about online courses, if you think about tutorials, if you think about online tools, I'll tell you, I work in communications. I'm not a designer. I learned some basic tools online. I use those tools these days. Canva being one of them, yes. I created an entire marketing campaign for corporate myself without having to see, okay, where do I get the designer for this? Where do I get that for this? And there's such an amazing array of tools that I think the creative in this season needs to be careful not to think, let me wait for COVID to end. What they need to figure out is what's on the internet that I could be learning. I read a fascinating article yesterday of a guy who was saying, be very careful about your area of specialization in this season and about adding to that area, because one day it may very well be obsolete. And we were talking with a photographer who's an event photographer. And he said to me, Kuria, what do I do? There are no events. And I'm like, okay, maybe you need to think about in this season, what photography is still required, or what photography can still happen in a season like this. And we were talking about friends who have learned, again on the internet, the photography skills for landscape photography. And now they go out into the Mara and they are paid by clients, even in a season like this, where tourism is trying to kind of, get back on the map. And what I am saying is that the internet is just an amazing space for learning, and you can learn new skills and learn your old skills, and position yourself completely differently. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing times that we live in. I think if people who, as Richie was saying, were there 10, 20 years ago and they came and saw what's going on today, they'd be like, oh my goodness, you guys have an amazing, amazing opportunity.
Yeah, that is incredible. The opportunities are they have increased completely. But now my question is, even as we are talking about undefiled, the theme for Momentum 2020, what would you advise someone who is dipping their toes now in the digital media, who is venturing now, has decided, I will pursue my creative side and business? What would you advise them to do or avoid doing?
Okay. You want to go first or I go? You can go. Okay. So for me, it always starts offline. What is your vision? Look at the internet as a tool. Why do I say offline? What is it that you love doing? What is it that you're good at? What is it that you have been doing all this time? Before even per se the internet or anything. I can't really say before the internet, because for a lot of people, maybe the internet has been there all their lives. But what skills do you have? Now, the internet is literally accelerating you to be able to do those things faster, cheaper, reach a wider audience. Does that make sense? I've been trying to find a way for me to explain to people what's happening currently. And this is how I define it. Think of yourself as being born. I mean, you're a baby, you're in the womb. You're in the womb for 9 months. So what has been happening ever since 1995, when Windows 95 came, was that we were in a womb. And the womb that we were in, that we had a leg on analog and a leg in digital. But this womb was to fully transition us into getting ready for this digital world, fully digital world that we're going to come into. What COVID and this season is right now, it's a birthing season. And with it comes a lot of pain. There are a lot of people who per se only had both their footings in analog who are feeling the pain. And I won't lie to you, it's been difficult for a lot of people. Businesses shutting down, no access to customers, no access to audience, churches, for example. However, if you had some resemblance or some footing in digital, what that has sort of done is enabled you to still have some element of survival. But we're going into a world that is fully digital. I'm not going to say there's not going to be no gatherings or anything like that post-COVID. I really do believe they may come back. But the ones who will succeed and enter into a whole new space is those ones who have fully transitioned their mental to have an acceptability for digital. So for those people who are there right now, begin to fight your mentality to have an acceptance of digital. Begin to look and say, I'm doing this offline. I'm a great painter. I'm a great photographer online. And normally I just put my artwork and people come. How about if I open up a website and put my pictures up? Experiment. Try. This is the perfect time to fail. And as Kuri has perfectly said, fail forward. But don't let the season break you. Let it break your mentality if that's what needed to be, but don't let it break you to the point where you give up. Unless you're giving up. That's a rapper coming in. But what I'm just saying is, try and do those things that you had digitally previously maybe not done. Try. I promise you, in that trying, you will see results. Let me just end by saying this. Practical example of what I'm doing. Let me practically give an example. I love collecting stories. I love having stories with people in the creative art sector, musicians who've gone before us, and finding out, tell me about your journey. And I've been doing this for 2 years, putting up that content, no one really consuming that content, having my 300 views, but still, because I was passionate about it, I always explored my passion, and I put my passion online. What happened in this COVID season is that there has been an acceleration in people consuming that content with the same mentality that they consume TV. So now what it forced me to do is have to create content every day, because there's some people who, when they get home, they switch on CTA, clean the airwaves, and begin to watch the content that I've created in the same mentality that they would watch a Netflix or a TV station. I'll give an example of Abel Mutua. He could have said and thrown up his hands and said, we're no longer COVID restrictions. We cannot have meetings and gatherings. Yes, the hardship came and the reality of what happened came, but he said, you know what? Let me just put a camera. My wife will even be the camera person. Let me just talk and tell stories. And what has happened in this season? He has exploded with viewership, but also monetization. For his own life, he has created a whole new way to monetize his gifting and talents. God didn't make mistakes when he gave you that gift and talent. Just figure out how you transition it into this online space.
Mm-hmm. Sylvia?
I don't know if there's anything else to add to that. He's basically said the majority of it. But I think the fundamentals, as I said earlier, are what count. I won't speak to it from a digital perspective, but for any young person who's out there who wants to be successful, wants to take their idea out to the world, at the end of the day, it's all about follow your passion. Right? That will always stand you. You see, like for him, he started his Clean the Airwaves campaign 2 years ago. We were not watching it. Now, when we are all trapped in the house, you see, God was preparing him for this day, right? And what happens is that you gradually get capacity. You will never have all the capacity that you require at the very beginning, but your capacity to be able to build goes as you move. And God will help you when you take the first step, right? But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is, guys, we just have to be people of excellence. The fact that we are Christians requires us to have a higher level of excellence. And there is no shortcut to success. I know there are very many models that are out there where we see people went on the internet, they built a business, suddenly they shot up to fame. But if you shoot up to that kind of fame without having gone through the process of learning how to handle the success or handle the growth, it might end up breaking you. So show up every morning. No, whether you have an audience or you don't have an audience, one of the principles I live by is by saying, I have an audience of one. So if my audience of one is watching me and I know he's checking, Sylvia, are you being excellent? Are you being faithful? Are you being diligent? Are you being disciplined? If I'm playing to that audience of one, it makes sure that I'm always giving it my very best. You may not have many people who are cheering you on, but God has given you a gift and you must rule your gift. Because if you don't rule your gift, it will not bring you to those great men. Sometimes we have gifts that destroy us rather than build us, right? And there are many examples that we can speak to this day. So are you in command of your gift? And are you able then to articulate your gift in a way that then enables you to be able to grow? And at the end of the day, hard work. There's nothing that will ever replace hard work, no matter where you go. So you have to outwork everybody in the room. You have to use, if you have nothing else, just use your own two hands. If it requires that you go dig it yourself, you don't have anybody else who you can employ because you don't have the funds, go do it yourself. That's the best process about learning. And when you come back and then you look at your steps, suddenly the dots will connect and you realize that I was not where I used to be. Those are the stories of greatness. And I think for me, the key thing is just to encourage people to start where they are. As I said earlier, do not despise the day of small beginnings. And I'll tell you a small little story. I have a farm, not a big piece of land, but a farm that I have. So the other day, I brought in this guy who I met digitally, Caleb Karuga, who's very big on farming and everything. So I told him, you need to come and help me transform my farm. So I came, we went to my farm, I showed him, and we sat and started having conversations. So I thought he would come back to me and tell me, yeah, we need to do, because I have water, so let's do irrigation and all that. And then I thought he would come up with all these big fancy, crops, horticulture crops, let's put up greenhouses. He told me, you know what, Sylvia? We're actually going to start by serving the market with skooma and spinach. As to skooma and spinach, that I can do by myself. He told me, no, the way you're doing it is not the right, but also just look at the community that is around you. Where is your market? Right? How do you start with that market? What are they consuming every day? Because you need to begin to create a product where you're generating cash on a daily basis. How will you generate that cash? People are hungry. They're always looking to eat. What are they eating? Broccoli and cauliflower this year? No. What are they eating? Skooma and spinach. And that is where we started. And I think the challenge we have, many of us, is that you wake up and have this grandeur vision of, I have a big ranch and a big farm. But that's not where I start. I start with skooma and spinach. Gradually, that will grow to other things. So I think it's also to encourage everybody out there at home who's watching this, for you to build that momentum. Be willing to start at the place where you are. Be comfortable in it. Be proud of it. Give it your very best. Apply excellence. You'll be surprised where you'll find yourself 12 months from now when we're having the next Momentum 2021 conference.
I really like that. Why am I coming after the two of you? Could I have answered that question first? That would be so much better. But I mean, I really love what they have said, and I want to say what people say. I don't have much to add, but I will add it anyway. is to say, I think that there's a word I've had Sylvia use a couple of times, which has to do with integrity. Yeah. Which is integrity. And I think, especially for creatives and especially for content creators, I think integrity is also very, very important. I find the temptation, especially with the internet, is to try and figure out how do I grow my, whether it's followers, subscribers, whatever it is, as quickly as possible. And the temptation that I see many content creators fall into is lowering the standard of your content. And if you lower the standard of your content, it has certain shock value to it, and people are drawn to it very quickly. The challenge I see with that kind of content is that you always experience a very quick spike. And everyone looks and says, oh, well, I mean, we see to certain genres of music, even in Kenya today, that young people are engaging in. I'm nothing against the genre at all. I'm just saying that you can get this very initial spike if you lower the value and just the IQ and EQ of your content to try and attract people towards it. But the reality is your spike ends very quickly. And people don't realize that you have to build slowly. You have to build. We had a really good conversation with Churchill, King of Comedy in Kenya. And he said something very profound to us. He said to us that as he was beginning his career in comedy, there was the temptation for his comedy to move from being clean comedy to being a bit more risque and on the edge. And he said he had to intentionally, in fact, he said something very important. He said, if he was doing dirty content, he may have been in the US now, is what he said to us. But he said he would not have survived. But he stayed true to the thing that he felt, because he does clean content. And he stayed true to the thing that he knows. And you develop over a period of time. And I think content creators can easily fall into that trap for the now. I want subscribers now. I want viewers now. So, I'm going to do my TikTok video and, can I say it, shake my backside on the video. You'll get your viewers, you'll get your people will be moved by it. But if you don't have real value and integrity in your content, there'll always be someone who comes and does that better than you at some point. There'll always be someone who's more risque than you, and they'll get a bigger spike than you. And for me, what I say for people who are in the creative industry is build. Have integrity with your content, build it, commit yourself. Sylvia said something very important. There are no shortcuts. You have to put in the work. You have to put in hard work, whether it's in the online or offline space, whether it's in business, creative or digital. And that principle just remains. So for me, I think the thing is, even with the internet, deliver yourself from the curse of eyeballs. Over, I want immediate eyeballs now. Because you have to do something shocking to get immediate eyeballs. And people do it all the time. But it never lasts. Yeah. I was reading, this is a wind-up, I was reading a report from Hollywood. And they were talking about what the biggest movies over the past 10 years have been. And it was interesting for me, the genres were all family genres. It was all the kinds of movies that you can go, Avengers and things like that, you can go watch with your kids. Yeah. And for me, that was very interesting because it wasn't, none of the movies had cursing in them. None of the movies had nudity in them. None of the movies had, difficult language in them. Those are the ones that did well. But I think we live in the immediacy of the moment, and we live with a curse of eyeballs, so that we have no integrity with our content. You get your spike, it won't last. If you want to be a creative who lasts and survives the test of time, you really have to commit yourself to integrity of content.
Now, even as we conclude this conversation, we cannot fail to talk about the future. The future has amazing opportunities, but how do we align ourselves in our particular fields?
What does the future look like? It's so funny. If you asked me that in January, I'd tell you how the future looked like so well and convicted. And I'd tell you, do this, and then COVID came and bang. So the truth be told, nobody knows the future apart from God. But what I can say that can prepare you to sort of set yourself up is let me give an example. I can look at, when I'm doing CTA, I've gotten to 1,000 videos uploaded onto the channel. Out of those 1,000 videos, I myself, who's not even an editor, have shot, learned from the internet, edited, learned from the internet, and put it up on my own. Last month, I remember so happily sharing 1 million views. Just a couple of months before, I was getting 20,000 views. And I was excited with those 20,000. I was still doing my dabs. What am I trying to say? When I'm creating content right now, I'm just thinking about today. All I know is that today, I need to put out a video. I have made a pact with myself for the next 5 years. Every single day, I'm going to put out 40 minutes worth of content. Doesn't matter how busy my day has been. Doesn't matter whether I have the resources. Every single day, I'm going to put out 40 minutes worth of content that is in line with my vision. And I've written my vision and I've made it plain. Clean the airwaves using culture-shaping icons to create, distribute, and promote media with a positive influence. So every single day I ask myself, have I taken a step towards my vision? So it doesn't matter where you are, in whatever single sector that you may be doing. Another thing that this season has taught me is exactly what Karura said, comparison. The people who have copied me have put their videos out, and man, they've got more views than me. And I can enter comparison and begin looking and saying, but I could have done that and had those views. But I'm like, nope. You know, like a horse. When a horse is running, it's got blinders. So every single day I ask myself, there's this vision that God gave me. There's a purpose as to why I exist in this world. What have I done today to get closer to that purpose? So now that will mean, have I booked people to shoot? Have I edited videos? Have I distributed the videos onto the online platform? So to somebody watching this, first of all, have a vision. I've seen people on social media with crazy numbers but don't have a vision. So today they'll talk about this, tomorrow they'll talk about this, tomorrow they'll be with this person selling this product. They're going with the tide. Secondly, what steps are you taking to do this? And it is in the doing that I've learned about digital infrastructure, MOOC.com. It's in the doing that I've learned about the incorporation of how even to buy goods. A lot of the stuff I have learned in the doing, and I'm brave enough to step out. If I'm told no problem. And so the future, hands down, but then even if you look at the statistics and if you look at the past and where we're going, there's definitely an acceptance to digital. It doesn't matter where you are across the globe. Within the next 5 years, the one thing that I will be able to say is that I have access to you. Yeah. And that access will be through these gadgets. There's some stuff that we know is going to happen. When you talk about moving from 3G to 4G to 5G, when you talk about smartphones in people's homes increasing, when you talk about people creating all sorts of apps and digital infrastructure that helps you do whatever it is that you are doing easier. When you talk about the amount of content that is informative, inspirational, and educational that is being put out that you can learn and increase value to yourself, man, it's the future. Let me just say there's too much opportunity. In fact, focus is going to have to be a thing, especially if you're skilled at what you do.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I do. Please. I'm going to drop the hammer and I'll be like, what do I say? I've got two things to say, and I think we've said them. It's not really, very new things. I think a couple of things I'd say. I really want to reiterate this point of learning and learning. And I want to be practical, and I want to say, the way that the world is changing, I mean, it's so many careers exist today that didn't exist 20 years ago, 30 years ago, one generation ago. And I think for me, the thing is, when I think about the creative sector, is I have to think about how am I learning? How am I diversifying? I think to myself, if I'm a musician, if you're at home and you're a musician, become a producer. You must learn a skill that is new, that is different. If you're, if you're a musician, become a DJ. Learn that skill as well. If you're a photographer, begin to learn video. Begin to learn new skills. If you draw, begin to learn painting. Because I feel that and this is what I was saying earlier about picking one very narrow skill and focusing becoming a PhD in it. You become a PhD and tomorrow it doesn't exist. And I think for me, that's the one thing that I realized. So people who are in the creative sector, look around, look at what people are doing, learn, go online, look for tutorials, ask yourself, what are the new tools? People will tell you, video editors. There's video editing tools today that make a dummy like myself accelerate and reach your level very quickly. And if that's all you're thinking about in the creative space, if that's where you're putting all your energy, at one point you'll wake up, the world has changed and it's completely different, and we don't actually need that skill, or we need the skill, but we're not willing to pay you the same amount that we would have paid you years ago. If you think about outsourcing websites, there's a ton of outsourcing websites that could be the death of creatives, to be honest. There are sites like Upwork and Fiverr and things like that where you can go on and say, listen, I don't actually need an animator. I starting a business, and I asked a friend of mine who's a fantastic animator. I said to him, please animate my logo for me. He said, absolutely. Give me 60,000. And I said, okay, I'll get back to you. Don't call me, I'll call you. And I went online. I found an animator who was able to do it for $5. $5. And he was able to give me, actually $10. And he was able to give me not one or two, but 50 animations of my logo. 50 animations of my logo. And he did it within 24 hours. And I thought to myself, good Lord, this sector, the creative sector, is changing so rapidly. I'm not trying to scare people away from it, for those who are watching this, but I'm trying to give you the reality of learning and the beauty of saying, listen, I'm not going to stay in one lane. I'm going to learn. I'm going to diversify. I'm going to grow my skill in different ways. In fact, let me even just stop. I was going to say two things, but let me just say, because I don't want it to be diluted, learn. If you're in the creative sector, learn. Keep learning. Commit. Diversify your skill set. Drop the hammer. Take us home. Can we leave? Can we go?
I don't know what to say after that. Maybe, as you said earlier, I'll repeat maybe what has been said. But anyway, to be serious, I mean, the future is largely unknown. I mean, anybody who sits and says that they can predict the future for you they're probably, well, they're not, I think, who would have predicted that COVID would be here? Nobody. And that's what makes the future unknown. And I think that it being unknown also makes it a bit exciting because there are very many possibilities. And the people who are first could be last, and suddenly the ones who are last could be first. So I guess the question to ask yourself is, what are you doing with your current reality and your current present? Because your present is always unfolding. And as he has rightly said, if you have a learning mindset, if you're a person who says, whether you are a business, we are a learning organization. If you say as an individual, I'm a learning person, it means that you're constantly trying to improve your skills. I recently signed up for a course. Right? Why would I need to do a course at this particular? But I'm saying I want to improve myself. I have extra time. Well, I don't really have extra time on my hands, but I'm saying I'm still preparing myself for that future, which is unknown. And based at least on what I know today, what is the action that I'm taking to prepare me for the future? But I think over and above that, maybe something that's very personal to me and in line with the theme about being undefiled is about knowing who you are, right? Because ultimately, if you apply all the success ingredients of you work hard, everything that we've spoken about here, you have you come up with good products and services. You go online, you meet the needs that people want. You do all those things. I think at the end of the day, the thing that will sustain you into that future that you want to go into is your character. And I think it was Miles Munro who said once that you're a seed with a forest inside you. Right? But how can God allow that forest to grow if he cannot trust the character that will bear the weight of that forest? And I would really like to encourage a lot of people who are building businesses, spend time thinking about the convictions that will carry you in the current reality and that will stand and never change even as you go into the future. Earlier you asked about things like policies. It's about what is your worldview? What is my perspective about how I deal with people? What is the life that my products are giving? What is the energy and are we a life-giving organization? That's why he keeps emphasizing positive entertainment, or are we taking away? Because it will give you that spike, but if it is not bringing life, ultimately it will fall away. And therefore you have to really determine, who are you going to be? Who are you today? And is that same person going to remain consistent going into the future? I think the pressures of growth and the pressures of growing into the future is that you end up diluting the person that you are. You end up diluting the values or the blueprint that God downloaded into you. And if He cannot trust you with that, then ultimately you'll not be able to achieve long-term success. So prepare yourself for the future by investing in knowing who you are, whose you are, and remember that you are presenting and representing somebody to the rest of the world. When she asked earlier, there is a community that is known well for doing business. It's probably because of the values that they extol, right? They have been consistent one generation after the other. That has never changed in terms of their character. So what is your character? And when you become successful, whatever success means to you, will that character remain constant? I think that's important for the future.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wish we had more time. But ladies and gentlemen, this is a conversation that is ongoing. Follow us on social media. This is Momentum Africa, where we'll continue engaging in different forums as we continue learning how we can be positive change in our society. See you on social media.
Generation that is undefiled. 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 To be birthed of a generation that is undefiled. We arise, we are called by your name. We arise, we shall not be afraid. We arise, and we stand in your grace, in your grace. We arise, we are called by your name. We arise, we shall not be afraid. We arise, and we stand in your grace, in your grace. We arise, we are called by your name. We arise, we shall not be afraid. We arise, and we stand in your grace, in your grace.